Domantas Sabonis is in the All-Star game, and De'Aaron Fox stays disrespected. I can't say I'm surprised, but I am not happy, to say the least. Howard Beck from Sports Illustrated joins me on today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season long. Today, presented by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer for ABC 10 News. And before we get into the negative, before we get into the disappointment about De'Aaron Fox, we have to start with a congratulations to Domantas Sabonis. Absolutely deserved. He was the biggest lock of all locks to make this Western Conference All-Stars reserves list. He absolutely 100% deserves to be there. He's the first Kings All-Star since 2017. So congratulations to Sabonis. He has had a tremendous season and deserves all the flowers in the world. And I guarantee you, even a frustrated and upset De'Aaron Fox would first point out his teammates' success. So we celebrate with Domantas Sabonis and we celebrate his accomplishments and achievements, but we're pissed off that De'Aaron Fox is not standing by his side and sharing the floor with him on All-Star Weekend in Salt Lake City, where he belongs. I don't know if it's worth the time and the energy for me to take apart this list and say, how the hell did Dame Lillard get in and De'Aaron Fox didn't? You know my opinions on that if you listen to yesterday's Locked On Kings podcast. I don't know if I could be overly upset, although I know some people will be, about Jaren Jackson Jr. getting in and De'Aaron Fox not getting in. Regardless, here's what I have to say. Here is what the NBA has essentially told De'Aaron Fox. The NBA has told De'Aaron Fox that he would have been better off prioritizing getting his own numbers, putting up more points and getting more assists and not collecting wins. And I firmly believe that had De'Aaron Fox put in more effort to his own individual numbers and his own personal numbers and prioritize that over helping his team win basketball games. If De'Aaron Fox had just tried to look for his shot and taken 25 shots a game every single night from start to finish instead of conserving his energy so fourth quarter Fox could consistently lead the Sacramento Kings to victories this season and to a third seed that nobody expected, he would have been better off doing that. I think it's embarrassing for the league. And you know what? If De'Aaron already hasn't, or if De'Aaron's already not using the disrespect or the lack of attention or whatever to fuel his fire to improve and to lead the Sacramento Kings, just wait. Just wait. All I will say is just wait until De'Aaron Fox gets that playoff stage that he's been yearning for his entire career. The entire NBA is going to look foolish. He's going to put the entire NBA on notice when he gets that platform. When De'Aaron Fox gets the opportunity to play and lead the Sacramento Kings in the playoffs. Yes, with Domantas Sabonis by his side, De'Aaron is going to shine. I have zero doubt in my mind. And those who don't believe De'Aaron Fox deserves to be an all-star because they don't watch Sacramento Kings basketball, or they watch a highlight or two and pay attention to a box score and say Dame Lillard or someone else deserves to be in there more than De'Aaron Fox. Those people are going to be proven wrong. And they're either going to admit that they were wrong and learn to appreciate De'Aaron Fox, or they will continue to be stubborn and continue to argue even though they know they're wrong. And what's clearly in front of them, they will ignore that and make up their own facts, which is fine. If they want to do that, that is fine. All I know is the real prize for De'Aaron Fox is still to come. He absolutely deserved the recognition that comes with being an all-star. He deserved the financial compensation that came with being an all-star. I also know that it came out today that De'Aaron Fox is missing tomorrow night's Kings versus Pacers game because of personal reasons. We can assume those personal reasons have to do with the soon-to-be birth of his new son. I don't know that for sure. That's complete speculation. We would hope that those would be the personal reasons. Regardless, we hope everything's okay with him and his family. But De'Aaron's best days as a basketball player are still ahead of him. And like I said, when De'Aaron gets that stage, he will shine to a point where he cannot be ignored anymore, regardless of where he plays. Regardless of where he plays. It's a shame. It's disappointing. I'm really not angry. Truth be told, I'm not angry. Like I'm not surprised. I'm disappointed, but I'm not angry. I'm not surprised. He absolutely deserves to be there. And I hope De'Aaron Fox proves everybody who didn't choose to put him in dead wrong. And I hope he makes the NBA pay for it, and it makes the NBA, if nothing else, feel foolish about their decision, even if there are bigger names ahead of him that got in and got spots when he didn't. He deserves to be there, man. He deserves that recognition. And it's a shame that the NBA continues to move the goalposts and that all-star voting and all-star selections continue to move the goalposts for him. When he was putting up good numbers, the Kings didn't have wins. Now the Kings have wins, and he's not putting up good enough numbers. I would be beyond frustrated if I were De'Aaron. And I respect the fact, and I firmly believe from what I understand about him as a person and him as a player, I respect the fact that he would not sacrifice his team's ability to win and would not play so selfishly as to put up the numbers that would then get him the recognition that he already deserves because of what the Sacramento Kings are doing. It's a shame. It's just a shame. Well, on today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast, you are going to hear from Sports Illustrated's Howard Beck, who did have a vote with the media vote when it comes to all-star starters. And he did vote for Domantas Sabonis. You're going to hear him talk about that. Remember, Domantas Sabonis finished in third in media voting for a starter. So had media picked everything, Domantas Sabonis would have been a starter, and we wouldn't have to worry about reserves. But he says some interesting things about De'Aaron Fox because he doesn't choose. He doesn't have to vote or anything like that for the reserves. And you're going to hear him talk about that at the end of the podcast. We recorded this before we knew that De'Aaron was not selected and Sabonis was selected, although it was safe to assume, at least on the Sabonis side. So we talk about that at the end of this interview. At the beginning of the interview, Howard and I talk a lot about his perspective and the national perspective on what the Sacramento Kings are doing, being in the third seed. Of course, we talk about the Kings' approach to the trade deadline and a whole lot more. I highly encourage you to stick around and listen to that. Before I get to that, though, let's pay some bills really quick. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. It's this year, it's the only app that you need at Super Bowl parties, America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sportsbook in America. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that makes betting on sports fun and easy. If you download FanDuel right now, you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from money line to point spread to who will score a touchdown first. And of course, it's not just football. With the Super Bowl, that's where all the betting is focused on right now. But you can bet on Kings games. You can bet on future prop bets, side bets, awards for Sacramento Kings. That's all on FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook, that app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. And best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. At this point, it is a trade deadline tradition to have Sports Illustrated's Howard Beck here on the Locked On Kings podcast. He's so generous with his time around a very busy time of the year. But Howard, normally I'm bringing you on in a panic about what drastic move the Sacramento Kings have to make to either save their season or set themselves up for a better future. Here the Kings are in the third seed in the Western Conference just a week before the deadline. And it's a position that not many of us expected the Kings to be, and a lot of us in Sacramento are still rubbing our eyes, wondering if it's real or not. So before we dive into everything, Howard, it's a pleasure to have you back on. From your perspective, I don't know if it's the legitimacy of this Sacramento Kings team, but from your perspective, as someone who pays pretty close attention to what Sacramento does and what the Kings have done over the last 16 years, what is your overall just takeaway or view of the 2022-2023 Sacramento Kings?
Well, thanks for having me back. I had forgotten that we did this about a year ago. So I'm honored that this is now a pre-trade deadline tradition. I'm actually trying to remember now. Did we react to the Sabonis Halliburton deal? Had that already happened?
I can't.
Right
I honestly have to look back. Typically, we've done before the trade deadline and talked about rumors of what the Kings might do at the trade deadline. The last year has been just a whirlwind of reaction. So, I mean, the reactions have obviously drastically changed with that trade and how that trade is looked at from now even to a month ago. So it's pretty crazy.
It's funny because in the moment, we might as well start with that, right? Like in the moment, it was easy to be skeptical of the Kings' side of that because of what Halliburton had already showed, and then over the course of the rest of last season, what he showed during his time with the Pacers. And even now, there's a part of me that that's tough, man. You got giving up on time. Halliburton's going to make the All-Star team in the East, probably. Sabonis is going to make it in the West. So, on balance, it feels balanced, right? Like it looks good. Everybody's saying that now, benefited both teams. Rare deal that you could say that about definitively. There is still some little part of me that thinks, man, Halliburton, he's young, he's got all the years ahead, he's on a rookie deal, all that, but it has worked out spectacularly. The Kings are legit. You don't have to ask me or anybody else. When you get to this part of the season, we're past the mathematical midway point. The sample size is big enough. The Kings are legit based on the sample size. But there's all different versions of legitimacy. And I think from a Sacramento perspective, we could sit here and talk about, well, are they truly a top 3 team? And we'll get to that, I'm sure. And are they a contender yet? Are they, we're getting ahead of that discussion. It's fine if you want to let the imagination run wild. Kings fans, Lord knows, have been through enough. Enjoy every aspect of it, even including whatever soaring expectations you might have that go beyond reasonable. That's fine. But the legitimacy is clear. And so now it's just a matter of where they go from here. I think as long as they make the playoffs, to me, it's a successful season. Just ending the drought, just taking that step forward, just establishing a baseline of what you expect to be for the foreseeable future and reestablishing some respectability within the league. All that matters a lot. So easy for me to say I do not have an emotional investment in this, but I would say they've already won. The season's already a success. Obviously, they need to finish it out. They do need to make the playoffs, but I'm not going to judge much based on what happens in the postseason. Also, by the way, they're fun. So there's that. All of this they're all just good steps. The quick hitters on the stats here, right? So they're number 2, as you and I record this, number 2 in offense behind the Nuggets, number 21 in defense, just behind. I mean, it's a really tight pack. Like they could easily be like 18th or something, 19th. But they're right behind like Atlanta, Toronto, and the Lakers in defense. And this is the whole thing, right? Like if you're going to be a legitimate powerhouse or a contender or a legitimate top 4 team with aspirations of winning at least a round or 2 in the playoffs, at some point the defense needs to be there. We talk about defense wins championships. We talk about needing a top 10 defense and all this stuff and the history of top 10 defenses among championship teams. But you at least need some degree of that. You need to be at least middle of the pack, I think, to expect to win playoff series. And so that's where the Kings, obviously, they're the work that still has to be done. That's nothing revolutionary on my part. They don't have a real rim protector. You need mobile bigs who can switch everything. The Pacers had all those years where they were debating, like, is it a front court with both these guys? Is it one? Is it the other? And what happens when Sabonis is at center? And do we have enough defense? Well, that's the Kings' quandary now. If Sabonis is your center, how are you manufacturing a defense around him when he's not truly a defensive impact as a center? He's not a traditional rim protector. So anyway, I would say on balance, because I asked you send me a few questions ahead of time, like what do we make of like the third place standing? I would say it's impressive, but probably a little misleading. I looked this up just out of curiosity. So their winning percentage right now is .580, which is about 47 to 48 wins, which suggests solid team, not contender. But if you're below 50, you're really good, but you're not great. That winning percentage would have put them 7th in the West last year. We have this weird season where parity reigns. and that's helping a lot of teams, and it's keeping a lot of teams' hopes up right now. And it's helping the Kings be third with a winning percentage that last season would have been seventh. And so I'm curious now, not so much about what the Kings sustained, though that's important. I'm curious about what happens with this other pack of teams. The Clippers, who are kind of resurgent and healthy now. The Mavericks, who will see what they can do and if they get themselves any help at the deadline. The Timberwolves, who have shown some signs of life. The Warriors, who, they're just all over the map, but they're still the freaking Warriors. The Suns, who will get Devin Booker back soon. And the Pelicans, the Pelicans have just plummeted to 10th, but by percentage points in the winning percentage. The Pelicans were first or second for most of December when they were healthy. They've now gone a month without Zion, and they were without Brandon Ingram for even longer than that. I still believe in the Pelicans, and they were a two-way team when they were at their best. So at a minimum, I think that the Clippers, Pelicans, and Warriors are better than their records, which means the Clippers, Pelicans, and Warriors are teams that could potentially displace the Kings at some point. But I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying that's what I would keep my eye on is there are teams that should be better than where they are.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of the Kings being that middle-class family or businessman that's invited to the social club of elites and looking around holding a drink going, what am I doing here? Like, there's an element of that. But I also think there's an element of the Kings saying, no, we deserve to be here because of how big of a sample size that we've put together. That being said, to me, the word is experience, Howard. And I look at, to me, once the Kings make the playoffs, at that point, it's house money. Like, even if you somehow secure a third or fourth seed in home court advantage, which we never thought even possible going into this season, regardless of what happens in that series, will we be disappointed if the Kings get swept? Absolutely, especially with home court advantage. But the Kings don't have any kind of experience really at the top, or very little experience at the top of being a top seed in the Western Conference, or De'Aaron Fox has never ever been there before. And it's going to be De'Aaron and Sabonis and a little bit of their supporting cast that takes them as far as they're going to go in any kind of playoff series. To me, there's a massive gap between good and great. And I think the Kings have solidified themselves as good. And it's the experience of losing in the playoffs. It's the experience of these teams that have been there before, biting at your ankles for the final 20 to 30 games of the season, surviving that and overcoming that's what takes to start really truly that path towards great. Think I'm on the right path there, or am I jumping the gun a little bit?
No, I agree with that. I mean, listen, I believe in some of the kind of just, unwritten rules or axioms of the NBA. Generally speaking, experience wins, and generally speaking, young teams need to get smacked around a little bit in the postseason, and even need to be in a tight regular season race to make the playoffs, right? The things that really sharpen you and test you and put you under the spotlight, and then you get in the playoffs, and that's a different level of intensity and focus that it's required. And so I believe in all that. And, occasionally there's an exception to the rule. Occasionally some young team goes on a deep run. But in general, you got to kind of go through it. Mm-hmm. And so, the 16-year drought, I say this all the time, like the 16-year drought is not on this group. It's not on De'Aaron Fox or Sabonis or even Harrison Barnes, who's been there for more of those playoff misses than I think most there. It's not on Kevin Huerter. It's not on Mike Brown. It's not on, Monty McNair and Wes Wilcox. There's this specter of it that they have to kind of deal with, right? And maybe it adds a pressure there. But this is a group that's just trying to make their own mark regardless of where they're playing or what their team's, playoff history or lack thereof was. So the important thing is just that they make the playoffs and see how that tests them and see how it sharpens them and see what holes it exposes. And then that helps you formulate your plan for the offseason and for how to take the next step. Because usually that's the case. Cool. You're out of the lottery. Cool. You're a 45 plus win team. Great. You're probably a first round and out team. Okay. That's fine. What's next? How do we build on top of this? So, the hard parts were some of the decisions they already made. Halliburton for Sabonis was not an easy call for them by any stretch. Great deal acquiring Huerter. So they've already, when we talk about the trade deadlines in a week, What might the Kings do? I don't know, but they've already done a lot of their work to get where they are right now. They don't necessarily have to worry about accelerating it or push all the chips in yet. This is just the start of this for this group.
That kind of leans into where I was going to go with my next question, is that approach to the trade deadline. I'm expecting a very boring trade deadline for the Kings in comparison to last year, of course. Like, the big splash move has already been made. Now, if suddenly Pascal Siakam or OG Anunoby is on the table and the Kings really want to go for it, I have skepticism as to it being the right time and that even being necessary at this point, although I understand the allure and attraction, especially from a Kings fan standpoint. But to me, like, the real gold from this trade deadline from a Kings perspective is going to come from what the rest of this packed Western Conference does. Like, to me, like, we've seen rumors of Kings connections to Matisse Thybulle, obvious defensive improvement, someone who offensively, major question marks. Like, you're talking about, where do they crack the rotation and how significant of a role do they have? We've talked a lot about here in Sacramento, the Kings solidifying more of that backup center position. We're talking about someone who's going to play 8 to 12 minutes a night. And when the Kings get to the playoffs, they're likely leaning on Sabonis for 40 minutes a night. So in reality, these are kind of minor moves that we would expect the Sacramento Kings to make. So kind of going back to my question to you, which you kind of already addressed a little bit here, it's one thing to hope that a third seed is the position that the Kings are in every single year for the next couple of years. When you're here right now, how much do you think, you don't want to jump rungs on the ladder? You don't want to, like you said, put your chips in and go all in. But if you're in this position right now and it's never guaranteed that you'll ever be in this position again, how much do you expect that to weigh on a general manager who just signed a 3-year contract extension and now knows, okay, they're solidified, and the idea is this Fox, Sabonis, Herter, Keegan Murray core that's all kind of on the same age together is going to be here for a long time too?
Yeah, I mean, it takes the pressure off, obviously. You know, I think it's when you feel like you're under the gun that maybe front office executives sometimes make, you know, an ill-fated move, a desperation move, a roll of the dice that, you know, might have been ill-advised and maybe that they wouldn't have done if they weren't feeling the pressure of, man, my job is on the line. So I think the extension helps him and the front office. And I think it helps, you know, keep you kind of sober-minded at the deadline. I would expect them to be opportunistic. I would expect them to, you know, be open to whatever comes their way. And maybe they're poking around on a few things. And yeah, look, if you could add some defense at the wings. I mean, I was thinking about this earlier, like, all right, if this is the configuration going forward, some team built around De'Aaron Fox at point guard, Herter at shooting guard, Keegan Murray in the front court. We'll see, you know, Harrison Barnes has been like the, you know, perennial, like, is he going to get traded, all that stuff. But the key things being Fox and Sabonis, right? Those are your two cornerstones. And maybe Murray becomes part of that too, as he matures. But if that's the case, you've put yourself in a position where you now have to figure out another way to make yourself great defensively, or at least sound defensively, right? You're probably not going to go down the path of what the Pacers had for years of trying to figure out two bigs fitting together. So you got to make up for it somewhere. You've got to establish it somewhere. So can you just, you know, be that locked down on the perimeter? Can you get, you know, a Thybulle? Can you get, I don't know if they could get in the Anunoby sweepstakes. We don't even know if there is an Anunoby sweepstakes.
Right.
Can you find that kind of player somewhere? You know, it was really obviously a key for the Warriors to get Andrew Wiggins when they did, to help shore themselves up defensively on the wings. So that's a place to look, but, you know, those guys are hard to get. And, you know, I don't know if the Kings have a ton to deal with, because a lot of your best pieces are the ones you want to keep and keep building around. So I don't know. I really honestly do not know what to expect from them over the next week.
I think that's completely fair, and that's to be expected. And I think that's part of the ride that we're going to enjoy too. And one thing I guess that we can say, and I'm curious if you agree with this or not, Howard, from my perspective, and I think what should be the Sacramento Kings perspective, is Monte McNair has earned the trust and has shown his willingness to make moves and put himself at risk for moves that he firmly believes will improve the team. And for the most part, every move that he has made has completely turned this organization around. So is that you think, appropriate mindset for not just the Kings fan base to have, but maybe Kings ownership to have of if our general manager says staying put is the right move or the right deal is not out there, even if we see these sexy names being floated around, trusting him and trusting the process. If you're Joel Embiid, like, is that the right mindset you think for the organization, including the fan base, to have?
Listen, the fact that the Kings have been where they've been for as long as they've been, the fact that they are where they are right now, I think suggests very strongly that Monty McNair should have earned the trust of both ownership and the fan base. There's always going to be some quibbles along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Look, Bob Myers has won 4 championships in 8 years, and there's still Warriors fans all throughout, by the way. I think even in the good times, and especially over the last few years, and even now in the wake of a championship less than a year ago, who are like grumbling about this thing they didn't do or this thing, like that's just sports. But Monty McNair, at a minimum, if you're going to judge a front office, it can never be on any one given move. It can't be any one draft where it's like, oh, you should have grabbed this other guy. No, the draft is a little bit of a crapshoot. It's more art than science. I would evaluate a front office on like a 3 to 5 year rolling basis. Did you have more hits than misses? So there's that. You make a trade, you make a signing. Not everything's you don't bat 1,000 on these things, but on the ones that are like the really big ones, there's extra emphasis. And the big one for them was Halliburton Sabonis. Mm-hmm. Controversial as hell at the time, and reasonably controversial. That wasn't people overreacting. There was absolute reason to think like, whoa, hold on a sec. Is this really the way to go? But the results bear it out. The results justify it. I think the front office has been vindicated. And I say that as somebody who was very skeptical of the rationale for the trade and the trade itself. But they have shown they've got the right idea here, and that this was going to, you can't even say accelerate the process, because like they've been stalled out for so long. They just needed to get in gear at all. And, that deal did it undisputably.
This episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy played the way it was meant to be played. The way it works, you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they will go and score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money if you get it right. And they have projections not just for the stars. It's not just for De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis every night. They'll have projections for Kevin Huerter, projections for Keegan Murray, projections for Trey Lyles. You pick the over or the under and get it right, you will cash in. So use that Kings knowledge, use that sports knowledge to cash in. And of course, they don't just have basketball. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch, including the NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Euro basketball, cricket, and more. Yeah, I'm not kidding. They have all of that. And there's no competing against other people. It's you versus the projections available. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They offer safe and fast withdrawals, and it's currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. So you deposit $100, you get $100. You deposit $50, you get $50. Just use promo code Locked On and sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Finally, Howard, before we wrap up, one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on today. Now, we have to tiptoe around this a little bit because of timing. We're recording this midday Pacific time, and we're going to find out in a handful of hours who the All-Star reserves are for both the West and the East. The expectation, at least here in Sacramento, is that Domantas Sabonis is a lock to be in, and it sounds like De'Aaron Fox is fringe. Whether it's looking through purple-colored glasses or not, I'm a firm believer that because of the turnaround and because of how important De'Aaron Fox has been in fourth quarters and in clutch, that he deserves to be in the All-Star game this year, and the Kings deserve to have 2 All-Stars with all that context pushed together. Although there's debates, of course, for Dame, there's debates for Devin. There's so many debates out there. Nationally, you have the umbrella view and are paying more attention to everything or the broad all-star conversation more than we are here from the Sacramento perspective. And you are amongst a handful of national media members that I really respect in this conversation, because I do believe you try and approach it as fair as possible, even if you're not able to watch as many Kings games as we are. What is your opinion of whether or not Fox gets in? We'll know by the time this podcast is out, but what is your opinion of De'Aaron's case for being an all-star, whether he's a selection of yours or not? I'm just curious, like De'Aaron's case compared to some of the other big guards, names we've seen there before this season alone.
Yeah, and real quick on Sabonis. So, I was one of the, I think, 100 media members that had a ballot for the, media does 25% of the total.
Right.
I had Sabonis in my front court as a starter.
Good for you.
And obviously a lot of my colleagues did too, because the media had Sabonis third. If the media were deciding, Sabonis would be an all-star starter right now. But the players had him fifth and the fans had him ninth. And that's the way the math worked. So he didn't make it. I think he was deserving. I think that when the coaches ballots were due on Monday of this week, again, by the time your listeners hear this, they will know the results. I will be shocked beyond belief if the coaches don't put Sabonis in there. De'Aaron Fox, it's going to be tougher for all kinds of reasons, but not least of which is, it's just a simple math thing. It's just too crowded. It's always been crowded in the backcourt in the West, and it still is. So Ja Morant is going to make it. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I think, is almost a mortal lock.
I agree.
Despite the Thunder's record, the guy is having an incredible season.
Right.
So there's your two, you go 3 front court, 2 back court again, and then you get 2 wild cards. So that means that De'Aaron Fox is now battling it. Let's just say Morant and SGA are the 2 locks at guard, even though these others could also figure in. But let's say it's those 2. De'Aaron Fox, forget even any other front court considerations, although I don't think there's too many of those anyway once they get their 3 reserves. So if the 2 wild cards are both guards, De'Aaron Fox still has to battle Dame Lillard, a future Hall of Famer who's having a renaissance season, Ant Edwards in Minnesota. Devin Booker's been hurt a lot, so that might help the other guys. Chris Paul is not having the greatest of seasons, but he's just kind of one of those guys, like he's always in the discussion, so I'm just putting him in there. Can De'Aaron Fox beat out some combination of Morant, SGA, Dame, and Edwards? I don't know. I mean, to your point, he's got a better record than 3 of those guys, so that helps. SGA is going to make it though, so like forget it. It's really just him versus Lillard and Edwards. I couldn't tell you how that's going to go, and since I don't do a lot of us in the business do if I'm picking the All-Star team, here's my 12. Right. I have not done that exercise. I have not picked my 12 because I don't have to. The ballot that I send in is the 5 starters. The coaches have to deal with the 7. Not my thing. Haven't gone through the exercise. So I can't even give you an honest answer. I can't even pander to your audience and say, yes, on my fake ballot, I put De'Aaron Fox over the rest of these guys. I can't. I didn't do it. He has a case. He has a strong case. This will be an interesting test of how much the coaches value winning over just the stats. And I think that is the general tilt of the coaches, that they pay attention to winning maybe more than some of the other, voting constituencies or opinion constituencies out there. And so I think that could help him. But man, if he doesn't make it, I'll just say this ahead of time. Well, one, I'm just, I don't know if morally opposed is the right phrase, but I hate these snub conversation. I hate the word snub as applied to these things. No one's getting snubbed. There's just a lot of really qualified candidates. And if De'Aaron Fox doesn't make it, it's not because he was disrespected. It's not because he got snubbed. It's not because of some anti-Sacramento bias. It's nothing else. It's just there's a lot of really good guys at the position, as there has been for years now in the Western Conference. It's tough to break through. If he doesn't get it now, I'm sure that he will some point in the near future. But Sabonis should be a lock, and I think the Kings will be represented in the All-Star game, which, again, another good sign.
Well, with the power of audio editing, I'll find a way to cut together Howard Beck saying that he would pick De'Aaron Fox and De'Aaron Fox alone over everything. Howard, you're so generous with your time. I really appreciate you. Personally, I lean heavily on the context of the season in addition to the numbers, especially considering Fox has been held out of the conversations because even if he had good numbers, he never had the wins. Now, he never had 30 points per game that Dame is leaning on right now, but I also believe Fox is capable of scoring that. And I'd argue that if he was trying to get those numbers, the Kings would not be in as good of a position as they are right now, given the circumstances. But that conversation, all these questions will be answered by the time this podcast is out. I hope the NBA gets it right. But either way, Sacramento will be represented, and that's a win in its own right. Howard, you're so generous. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Looking forward to doing this next year. Hey, maybe with the Kings making the playoffs, I can bother you to if you ever drop by Sacramento for a game to come on the podcast again. But you're the man, the great work that you do at Sports Illustrated. I appreciate you.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me back. And I am way, way, way overdue for a Sacramento visit for both personal and professional reasons. And I am trying to plot a trip out there as we speak. So hopefully see you out there sometime soon.
I'll pick you up at the airport. Really appreciate Howard taking the time here. Very, very busy guy right now, but he always comes on Locked On Kings. So gracious with his time, and I appreciate him so much. Hopefully you enjoyed that. I know for the most part, this is more of a negative day than a positive day because of De'Aaron Fox not making it like he deserved. I'm very much expecting a chip on Fox's shoulder for the remainder of the season, and especially when he gets, not if, when he gets into the playoffs this year. But also, let's not be too negative. Let's celebrate and rally around Domantas Sabonis getting the recognition that he absolutely deserves. Plus, former Sacramento King Tyrese Halliburton did get in the Eastern Conference. He absolutely deserves that. I hope people aren't stupid enough to compare Tyrese Halliburton to De'Aaron Fox, say Tyrese got in, Fox didn't, the Kings traded the wrong guy. If you're dumb enough to say that, I don't have the time for you. I'm sorry. I just don't. And normally I'm not like that, but don't do that. Please don't do that. Let's not do that today. I don't have the mental capacity to handle that. I'm already frustrated enough as it is. But we'll talk about this more, I'm sure, after the Kings and the Pacers game tomorrow night. Again, no De'Aaron Fox for that game, out for personal reasons. Should be a big game. I'm expecting big things from the Pacers, hopefully big things from Sabonis and his return to Indiana. And we'll have a post-game pod after that, of course, for you right here on Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.